Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here and welcome to Final Fantasy Bestiary. This series is dedicated towards discovering the history and lore behind Final Fantasy's most iconic creatures and characters. This episode, we'll be revisiting our previously released Bahamut Bestiary and update what we know on the daddy of dragons in Final Fantasy. Like most things in Final Fantasy, Bahamut has ties to real-life mythology. In this case, Bahamut, as he is actually known, originated in pre-Islamic Arabian mythology. Most often depicted as a fish or whale, he is one of several layers responsible for supporting the earth according to medieval Islamic cosmography. He lays in a bowl shouldered by some sort of angel or other mythological figure. Atop him stands the bull Kujata, whom has a ruby mountain on his back. Atop that mountain is an angel that holds up the earth, the heavens, and the hells. This compiled foundation is said to be immensely large in size, so much as that a single nostril of Bahamut would barely be filled by the entirety of Earth's oceans. And I guess it's more than coincidence that the Final Fantasy franchise has had Bahamut as a foundation all these years as well. After Dungeons & Dragons turned Bahamut into the Dragon King for the modern days, Final Fantasy adopted this abstract of him as well, and made him one of the franchise's most beloved and iconic creatures. Also iconic is his ultimate attack, Mega Flare. This attack deals massive non-elemental magic damage to foes and has been reworked throughout the series to better fit the different depictions of Bahamut. As the character in this episode is very iconic, we will likely be talking about some spoilers of the various Final Fantasy games. If there's any you haven't played or any you in particular don't want to be spoiled on anywhere from Final Fantasies 1 to 15, I recommend you probably either turn it off as soon as you hear the name of the one that you don't want to hear, or just don't watch the video altogether. Bahamut got his start in Final Fantasy 1, where he rules over the Cardia Islands and the dragons that inhabit it. He and his people are non-hostile, instead opting to strengthen the Warriors of Light should they bring him a rat tail from atop the Citadel of Trials. This allows the party to permanently transform into a higher tier of classes or jobs, and greatly enhancing their overall abilities. Dark Bahamut also appears in the Dawn of Souls version as a non-hostile gatekeeper in the Lifespring Grotto, which is an optional dungeon. Bahamut was skipped over in Final Fantasy II, though a wyvern resembling the concept of Bahamut does make an appearance. He would more formally return in Final Fantasy III, where the party encounters him atop the Dragon's Peak mountain. This battle is impossible to win without either cheating or massive grinding tricks, and as such the heroes are recommended to flee for the time being. Later in the game, after obtaining the airship the Invincible, you can fly to Bahamut's lair and formally re-challenge the Dragon King. With a weakness to wind magic, it was vital to quickly vanquish him with the right abilities, lest you be demolished by getting hit by 2 Mega Flares in the same turn. Upon defeating him, you obtain him as a summon, marking the first occurrence in a long tradition of Bahamut being a summon in the series. Though in this game, the summon is called Bahamur for some reason. In Final Fantasy IV, Bahamut is present towards the very end of the game. He lives on the Red Moon and is proclaimed as the god of the Eidolons, or summons in this game. When Rydia has obtained Leviathan and Azura, she and the party may challenge Bahamut in order to see if she is worthy to wield his power. Upon being defeated, he accepts Rydia as the first mortal worthy of his blessing, and becomes one of her summons. In regards to the battle itself, in versions other than the DS version, Bahamut's Mega Flare can actually be reflected back at him, rendering the fight incredibly easy. In the DS remake, this was fixed, but as a result, Mega Flare's damage was greatly nerfed, making this fight much less iconic than its previous iterations. Lunar Bahamut also challenges Kain during his trial in the Lunar Ruins in the GBA version, and Dark Bahamut appears as a boss in the optional Lunar Subterrane Dungeon. Final Fantasy V sees Bahamut in a much less important role, appearing as a quote deadly force unquote when the worlds are merged. He simply invites and awaits the party to challenge him at the top of the North Mountain after you obtain the tablet from the Pyramid of Moor. As a boss, Bahamut in Final Fantasy V comes packed with more than just Mega Flare, using a number of different elemental attacks in his arsenal as well. He only uses Mega Flare when he's low on health, but it's as deadly as ever here. Upon defeating him, Bahamut once again becomes a summon for the party. Final Fantasy VI was even less gratifying for a Dragon King, where this time he doesn't even appear as a boss. He is an Esper rewarded to the party upon defeating the optional boss, Death Gaze. Though he is very strong, this is so far Bahamut's least influential role, but that was quickly turned around starting with the next title in the franchise. Final Fantasy VII comes next, and Bahamut was done being given a backseat in this one. He has very little story impact in the initial entry, but it is explained by Professor Hojo that several different species of Bahamut exist, called Bahamut strains. In Final Fantasy VII alone, this gives birth to not only the normal Bahamut, but also Neo Bahamut and finally Bahamut Zero, who appears from the blue huge materia if the player has the other two strains when talking to it. In the other entries of the compilation of Final Fantasy VII, Bahamut Sin appears in Advent Children, while Bahamut Fury faces off against Zack in Crisis Core. While Bahamut pales in comparison to the game's ultimate summon, Knights of the Round, he is still iconic for both his first 3D appearance and the spectacles of his summoning animations. It's also remembered for the newer versions of Mega Flare used by the various summons. Neo Bahamut uses Giga Flare, and Bahamut Zero uses Terra Flare, attacks Bahamut would use again in future entries of the franchise. Bahamut Fury also utilizes another different one, titled Exaflare. In Final Fantasy VIII, Bahamut can be found late into the game by flying the Ragnarok airship to the secret dungeon in the top left corner of the map, the Deep Sea Research Center. Not much is known about why Bahamut is there, but he displays aggression and fear towards humans, so it's likely he was experimented on as a guardian force, perhaps to weaponize or to understand their effects. He is found in the first research room and will send ruby dragons to attack the party if they approach him while the blue light is pulsing, basically a fancy game of red light, green light, or in this case red light, blue light. Upon reaching him, he asks the party several questions. Answering the first two questions correctly places you in combat with ruby dragons, while answering the third correctly causes Bahamut to attack. Answering any incorrectly sends you back to the beginning of the room, which you have to slowly walk across again. Bahamut himself uses powerful magic such as Thundaga and Stop. Of course, he has access to his signature Mega Flare attack, and can even use it twice in a row without time for retaliation. Upon defeating him, he is obtained as a Guardian Force, and unlocks the lower levels of the research facility, where the Ultima weapon awaits the party. In Final Fantasy IX, Bahamut is one of many Eidolons, specifically belonging to Garnet. At a young age, Garnet could do little to access the power of her Eidolons, and upon turning 16, she had them extracted from her body so her adoptive mother could use them for war, including Bahamut. Queen Braun attempted to use Bahamut to kill Kuja, but Kuja used the invincible airship to enslave Bahamut and turn him on the Queen. Later, he also used Bahamut to attack Alexandria in an attempt to lure out Alexandria's sleeping protector, the Eidolon Alexander. With Garnet and Eiko awakening the Colossus, he quickly laid waste to the Dragon King, before suffering defeat by Garland. Eventually, Beatrix gives Garnet the gem containing Bahamut. Due to Bahamut being Garnet's primary Eidolon, the jewel used to encase his power is, of course, a Garnet. Final Fantasy X saw Bahamut play a major role in the story. In this game, there are entities known as the Faith that, upon meeting a summoner, may gift their power to those summoners so that they may use them to obtain the final summon and defeat Sin. Bahamut's Faith in particular seeks to put an end to what is known as the Spiral of Death, the cycle that brings back Sin every time he is defeated. To this end, he assists Tidus in his journey to uncover the truth about what he is and how he got to Spirit in the first place, even before Yuna obtains him as a summon. Upon being summoned, Bahamut is usually the player's most devastating offensive option for quite a bit, due to his ability to innately break the damage limit. He, of course, has the attack Mega Flare as his overdrive, but is also well known in this game in particular for his Impulse attack, which damages all enemies on the field. He has also fought as Dark Bahamut as an optional boss in the International and HD Remaster versions of the game, as well as appears briefly as an enemy and boss and Faith in Final Fantasy X-2. Final Fantasy XI sought to bring Bahamut back to his roots and remind everyone of how Bahamut was initially brought into the franchise, as a king of dragons. As one of the 5 terrestrial avatars tasked with protecting the planet, Bahamut is known as the Mighty Worm King, whose appearance can only mean that the apocalypse is coming. In the Chains of Promethea expansion, Bahamut appears due to a dark force known as the Emptiness severing the crystal line and attacking the Mother Crystals. He believes mankind wrought this fate and as such seeks to use his worm children to purge the planet of the enlightened races, thus, in his mind, saving it. He can be fought in an optional encounter once the Chains of Promethea story has been finished. In a follow-up rematch, Bahamut also summons 4 of his children throughout the fight to assist him: Tiamat, Oryu, Jormungand, and Vertra. He uses a number of deadly attacks you may recognize, such as Touchdown, Mega Flare, Giga Flare, and Terra Flare. It's worth mentioning that this iteration's Mega Flare and its variations are actually fire damage, something unusual in the series, though likely due to the nature of Final Fantasy XI being an MMO. Bahamut would eventually appear again in the storyline of the Rhapsodies of Vana'diel, which was meant to be the finale to Final Fantasy XI's story quests. He appears to reconvene with the other avatars in an attempt to fight back against the Emptiness along with the Warrior of Light. In Final Fantasy XII, Bahamut does not appear as a king of dragons, and is instead the namesake of the final dungeon in the game, the Sky Fortress Bahamut. This is built as the flagship of the Arcadian Empire, but is only able to fly when surrounded by enormous amounts of mist. This condition is fulfilled when Redis destroys the Suncrest. This not only allows Bahamut to fly, but also provides enough latent mist in the atmosphere to let the Sky Fortress charge its massive mist cannon. While the fortress itself shares little with the King of Dragons, the final boss is a fusion of Vayne Salador and the power of the Icurian god Vana, which allows Vayne to merge with pieces of the ship, taking on a form with the likeness of Bahamut. The Undying, the name of this boss, even uses Mega Flare, Terra Flare, and Giga Flare Sword as some of his signature attacks. Despite all of this, Bahamut appears as a summon in the sequel, Revenant Wings. In Final Fantasy XIII, Bahamut appears as one of the Eidolons the party must face to overcome the despair in their mission. Bahamut specifically appears as Fang's Eidolon and must be overcome in battle before she can use him in combat. In his Gestalt mode, he transforms into a mechanical wyvern that Fang can ride into battle. He is one of the most powerful summon options the party has, and is used often in strategies that require brute force. In Final Fantasy XIII-2, Caius Ballad also calls upon several iterations of Bahamut to achieve his goals, including Chaos Bahamut, Jet Bahamut, Amber Bahamut, and Garnet Bahamut. Even Lightning is able to summon a white version of Bahamut to help Noel escape Caius. In Final Fantasy XIV, Bahamut appears as the culminations of the events of the 1.x series of patches, destroying the surrounding landscape and ushering in the game's relaunch in that of A Realm Reborn. Initially one of the 7 children of Midgardsormr, Bahamut was defeated by the Allagans several thousand years prior to the game. His lover and sibling Tiamat was tricked by the Ascians into summoning him as a primal, which caused a twisted and emotionless husk of a dragon to appear and fight against the Allagans. He was eventually imprisoned within Dalamud by Omega, and launched into orbit of the planet, acting as a power source for the Empire. Eventually, Dalamud sent a powerful shock down to the Crystal Tower, and caused the destruction of the entire Allagan civilization. There, the primal Bahamut laid in stasis, growing his hatred for mankind and sustained by the ether and prayer of the other Mericidian dragons locked in Dalamud with him. Eventually, the Garlean Empire sought to experiment with the Red Moon, leading to Nael van Darnus, Legatus of the 7th Legion, to become enthralled by Bahamut and bring the moon crashing down to Hydaelyn, releasing the empowered primal. He was defeated by the primal Phoenix, which formed using Louisoix's body, the ether of the 12, and the prayer of all of Eorzea. However, his former prison Dalamud captured enough of Bahamut's essence to begin rebuilding the primal's etheric form from scratch. This allowed him to, on the brink of death, enthrall Louisoix and Phoenix as well. With the phantom remains of Nael and Louisoix, Bahamut spent the next 5 years waiting, until the Warrior of Light was tasked by Alycé to accompany her and journey into the remains of Dalamud to find out what really happened. Upon overcoming the many threats within the coils, Alycé, Alphinaud, and the Warrior of Light put an end to Bahamut, as well as the suffering of Louisoix and Nael. Bahamut Prime appears as the final boss in the Binding Coils of Bahamut raid series, though his power is also used by Nael to use his popular Mega Flare attack. He uses a number of variations on his Mega Flare attack, and additionally uses Giga Flare for even greater threat. His ultimate attack is Terra Flare, which players can only survive with the combined use of a Neuralink protection plus a tank limit break. This encounter was eventually remade into the Unending Coils of Bahamut, also known as the Ultimate Difficulty. In this encounter, the player is put up against a fictional version of Bahamut Prime, accompanied by his 2 greatest underlings, Twintanya and Nael van Darnus, or Nael Deus Darnus in this case, in a grueling encounter spanning almost 20 minutes. Eventually, Bahamut is attacked by the Phoenix, who buffs the party so that they may finish Bahamut for good. He too transforms into a Golden Bahamut, going completely insane with power. This gives him access to Akmorn, Alamorn, and his Exaflare skill. Remember that this encounter is nothing more than fictional hyperbole set in motion by the Wandering Minstrel, who is the in-game persona of Naoki Yoshida, the game's director and producer. Finally, we come to Final Fantasy XV, where Bahamut appears as a literal god. Bahamut is one of the 6 beings known as the Astrals, gods who ruled over the planet of Eos a long time ago from the ancient city of Solheim. While Bahamut, the most powerful of the Astrals, sought to protect man, his fellow Astral Ifrit saw them as ungrateful when he gifted them his flame, only for them to declare supremacy over the gods. Along with the arrival of the deadly plague known as the Star Scourge, Bahamut fought alongside the other Astrals against Ifrit and the Scourge to save mankind. To that end, Bahamut and the other Astrals devised a plan. They granted 2 mortals a great burden and a great responsibility. The first was the Oracle, a family line tasked with keeping the Star Scourge at bay by healing those affected. The Oracle's job was to buy time for the creation of the true king. This task was given to the line of Lucis, a family that would rule and die for the next 2,000 years. Every king who passed would have their energy stored into the Ring of the Lucii, thus empowering it over the ages. When it reached full power, it would become strong enough to rid the star of the Scourge forever. Bahamut encased himself within a crystal in the crown city of Insomnia and named Arden Lucis Calum as the first king tasked with rule. To defend the crystal, Arden absorbed the Scourge into his very body. While this task saved many lives, it also made him unfit to rule, tainted by the very thing the crystals and the line of Lucis existed to destroy. He was shunned by Bahamut and the other astrals, and was unable to die due to the Scourge's effect on his body. His blood relative Izunia was later chosen by the crystal instead, and Arden was exiled, where he planned his revenge. He waited patiently for Bahamut to choose the true king before enacting his revenge plot. 2,000 years later, Bahamut and the crystal are kidnapped by the Empire of Niflheim, with Arden acting as their chancellor. Eventually, Noctis finds his way to the crystal, where Bahamut appears as a man-like god encased in dragon-like armor, and informs him of the task of the true king. He allows Noctis to absorb all of the crystal's power into the Ring of the Lucii and destroy the Scourge for good, though the process would take approximately 10 years. While waiting for Noctis to wake up, Bahamut begins seeking out the former members of the Kingsglaive, who betrayed the royal line in the Battle of Insomnia. He enters their dreams and gives them visions of Angelgard Island, where Noctis is currently residing while he gathers the blessing of the crystal. Upon luring the Glaives to the island, he tests their loyalty to the line of Lucis by battling with them in front of his astral peers. Upon being defeated, he recognizes them as worthy and tasks them to ensure that the creatures born from the Scourge do not taint the Holy Land of Angelgard while Noctis is sleeping. They perform this task for the next 10 years until Noctis awakes. Bahamut finally appears when Arden summons Ifrit, whom he has tainted with the Star Scourge. Noctis summons Bahamut to attack the empowered Astral, though he has very little effect. He does buy just enough time for Noctis to land a critical blow, forcing Ifrit's true power to come out. At this point, Bahamut awaits the true king to fulfill his task and does not reappear. As a boss, in Final Fantasy XV's multiplayer DLC Comrades, Bahamut is fought as version 1.0's final boss. A rematch against him gives him a transformation akin to that of the Ultimate version from Final Fantasy XIV, which had just come out a few weeks prior, with his armor glowing and summoning a great many swords to assist him in battle. It is somewhat similar to the power that the Kings of Lucis have, the Armiger. This ends up being reflected in his most powerful attack not being Mega Flare, but instead being Ultima Blade. The final blow of Ultima Blade is shown to create a shockwave-esque explosion that could be Mega Flare, but it's more likely just Ultima itself, as the name of the attack implies. And with that, I think we can finally wrap up our revisit to the Bahamut entry in the Bestiary series. Yes, I know there's a ton of side games that have Bahamut, Type 0, Explorers, I could go on. But if we try to do all that, we'll be here for literally hours, and I've got other stuff to do. I will say that I do expect slightly more information to happen with Bahamut in Final Fantasy XV in 2018, but I think this covers the basis of what we can expect out of the Dragon God from Final Fantasy XV. So anyway, let me know what you thought of this revisit to an old entry in the Bestiary series. We want to remake some of the older ones to be more current and then take those other ones offline, and this was the first of many steps in doing that. So if you enjoyed it, be sure to let me know in the comment section, and I'll be sure to get the remakes out a little bit faster. Anyway, thanks for watching, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care.